Hey everyone, welcome to Rock Bottom Syndicate. I'm your host, Joyce Strong. Rock Bottom is about people who have a story to tell to inspire others. I first met Mark Metry, who is my guest on this episode, through LinkedIn. I started to see his image come up and hear his story little by little by little, and watched his consistency. And I got real curious how such a young guy learned so much. And as it turns out, we have a ton in common, Mark and I. We both grew up in the Boston area. He was born in Cambridge. I was born in Somerville. We're both fascinated with the impact of biochemistry and nutrition on the state of our mental health in our body and our ability to think clearly and make great decisions. And we've hit rock bottoms. Our secret to the prison of our emotions. And what Mark is going to share here is how once he broke through keeping secrets and hiding in his armor, as he said it, he began to change and grow and put himself now in a position where he is saving lives every day. He may not know who you are, but I know you're out there, and I know the impact Mark has had on me as a person, as a human, and as a mother and as a grandmother and as a coach for people. So I know that this is a blockbuster episode and you are going to love it. I adore Mark Metry, and I really hope that you will grab his book, Screw Being Shy, because it says it all. It's in there. It's much more depth than you realize. And the promise is that Mark is going to continue educating us on the themes that he's outlined in his first book. And this is not his last. So reach out to Mark at markmetry.com. Grab his book. It's out today. Official release is today. Came out yesterday. Screw Being Shy. I know I'm going to screw being shy because there's nothing in it for me. I want to be out there on top, helping you to make the changes that you want. And I want to be part of Mark's network and helping him and elevating his work as well. So anything I can do for Mark, I am there to help. Enjoy this episode of Rock Bottom Syndicate, and remember that there is hope, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And if we can do it, you can do it. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Hey, Mark. So happy to have you here today on Rock Bottom Syndicate. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Joyce. This is like the best podcast name I've been on, so that's awesome.
Thank you. Coming from you, I know you've been on hundreds, or at least over 100. So
yeah, I need to go back and count, but the number is like around 150.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's awesome. Well, I wanted you on today because I've been following you for quite a while, and I was inspired because you are the age of my youngest child. I have 5 kids, the youngest 4 boys. So I especially resonated with you because you're a guy the age of my kids, and I really felt like you could help me become a better mother and understand more and listen to my children, because I remember stuff from my own childhood and teen years, but hearing it from a boy, and I knew you had something to teach me, and I really wanted to hear about your rock bottoms and what you did with them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's that quote that's like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just think, I think that no matter who you talk to, good or even bad, I think you can always learn something, so whether that's me doing this podcast and vice versa, or you learning from me or to get a different perspective, that's what I think life is all about. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I love talking about rock bottom, and it's such an interesting topic because I think like rock bottom, like now that I look back at my rock bottom, of course it was the best thing to ever happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best part about it is like when you are that low and you have nothing else to lose, that becomes an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And you can make that as like a new sort of baseline, like for you, and you can begin to work at it brick by brick, step by step. And so that's what I love about rock bottom. It gives people a certain kind of freedom almost, and it makes them realize a lot of their previous mistakes, the ways that they were living life. And you really, like, what happens is when you hit rock bottom, you essentially realize like oh my God, I can't do that again. And like you really, because I think all of us, everyone's trying to do the best they can. Everyone's trying to find their own version of success. But I
Right.
think a lot of times we can be in our own way. Like we can maybe do behaviors that we said we didn't want to, even though we don't want to, but we do them, or whatever variety. And then when you hit rock bottom and you really realize that, like, wow, if I don't like get on top of this, like I'm screwed.
Yeah.
That's what I got out of my rock bottom. And it really enables you to really just change your ways. So for me, I mean, I probably had a variety of rock bottoms, but
Well, I know you talk a lot about when you in 2016 and how things kind of really showed their the rock bottom really showed up then, but I think it started earlier for you.
yeah, I mean, when I look at my major life events, I actually didn't even consider it rock bottom, but now that you said that, I'm pretty sure it is. So for me, like my parents came to this country as immigrants. We moved around like 16 times around the state of Massachusetts when we were first here,
Yeah.
because my parents were always working different jobs and just trying to survive.
Yeah.
But I had a pretty great childhood, and for me, when I kind of like look back now, in hindsight, as like really important, when I was in like second grade, third grade, um, I ended up going to a school out in like a super small rural town in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And a lot of nice people there for sure. But just like every place, not so nice people. And then especially the really interesting thing was that this place had like zero diversity. And so everyone looked like everyone else except for me. There was no, maybe like me and one or two other families in that entire town. And so like also that was that was like near a time of like post 9/11, and like Middle Eastern people, which are where my parents came from,
Hmm.
um really were seen very negatively in the overall mainstream public eye.
Hmm.
And so I faced a lot of like racism, of course, like bullying. I had some physical health issues
Hmm.
develop at that time too, like ADD, asthma, um, insomnia, issues with my skin, appendix, just a wide variety of physical health issues
Hmm.
that kind of just like looking back at it now is very like, I don't really think I chose this, because it kind of felt like I wasn't able to choose it. You just sort of slip in. But
Hmm.
I remember getting into this mindset where like I just stepped into my own bubble, and I just became super socially anxious, didn't want to talk to anybody. And eventually it came to the point where, like when I was in high school, and even though I wasn't being bullied anymore or I wasn't really facing any racism, I still had the same sort of consequences of those issues of me being super socially anxious, even when there wasn't really like a perceived threat, quote unquote. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, that for me was a rock bottom. And that's, I mean, I was stuck in that mentality for like maybe 10 years. And so that really shaped my life. And it even made me come out with a book about it because that's how important it is.
Yeah, I
And
think you do talk about that in your book. Do you think when you were younger and that you first developed that, was it protective for you in the beginning?
yeah, I talk about this in the book. I absolutely think it's protective. I think it's just a defense mechanism. And I think what ends up happening is like as kids, we go through our lives, and something happens unexpected that we didn't really know could happen. So whether that's like something super serious, like, I don't know, you witness a murder, or like some kind of violent act,
Hmm.
or it's a case like mine where you face racism and bullying, or for someone else it might be, maybe, you never really spent time with your parents. And so you kind of build this mentality of being like a loner and isolating yourself. And that's a defense mechanism. That's a
Hmm.
coping mechanism. Maybe you get physically abused somehow, and then you start to go to the gym and you get super physically strong as a defense mechanism for no one to hurt you again. And so I think that's very much like the human condition, this
Hmm.
behavior of experiencing some sort of traumatic event and then putting on some sort of a mask or a suit of armor to try to
Mm,
protect ourselves.
yeah.
And then I think as we get older, kind of going back to what I said about, we do these behaviors that we either said we weren't going to do or we said we were going to do, but we don't do them. I think a big part of it has to do with all this behavior that we've been conditioned to because it's helped us survive. At least that's what we think. And so when you're older, it's no longer really the case. And so a lot of these these coping mechanisms, these survival mechanisms that you used aren't really applicable to your life when you're like 25 or when you're 30 or when you're 35 and you haven't done and it never ends, but you haven't done or even started to do like that internal deep work on yourself. And so that for me is definitely kind of my first rock bottom for sure.
I noticed that for me, I'm 66 and it still happens. I still can pull
Mm,
things out, and knowing what I know, listening, what I've learned from you, I can go back to my childhood and say, that's something I needed then, but it's definitely me getting in my own way now.
absolutely. And I mean, like the matter of the fact is like, this is a super deep and complex topic. And I actually, I think when it comes to a lot of these, like human behavior, things and whatnot, I think a lot of it has to do with this as a root cause of sort of like our traumas and what we got used to doing and what we put on as masks. It's a super complicated topic, but what I just gave is a very like simple, like one line sentence of that. But I mean, there's a lot of other people that talk about this to a much better degree, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Nicole LePera, Mastin Kipp. A lot of these people talk a lot about this and are like professionals in this. I definitely recommend learning from them because this is like I think Oprah said this. She said, if any, I don't remember the exact line, but I'm paraphrasing. She said, if any philosophy or if any like manual or guide telling you on how to live your life does not somehow address psychological trauma, it's
Mhm.
missing a major piece. And so I think that is a big, big part of it. And so again, like the reason why is because like I'm very much like in the self-improvement, like entrepreneurial world. And
Mhm.
like there are all these people giving like these 5 hacks or like these 5 tips. And for sure that's important. I give them out too. But it's also like you got to understand the bigger underlying pieces because
Mhm.
if you're just working on like that surface area behavior, like that 1%, then you're just going to be like at the top of the ocean. But if you can drill down to like the deep ocean where like it's calm, it's cold, and you can begin to work from that way out, you'll notice like an exponential increase. And like you said, it never ends. So
Yeah.
I'm always going through this myself. I'm always engaging in this process. And when you think you don't have to engage in that process, that is exactly when you are in the beginning of building up another mask, another suit of armor, your ego to protect yourself and think that you've arrived. And so, yeah, it's a big game for sure. It's a delicate dance, but yeah, it's definitely interesting for sure. I highly recommend people kind of look in more to this because it's super important.
Yeah, the area that I'm starting to really focus on is that space between I know what to do, the information, and I don't do it. So really getting in the mindset piece and digging deeper. But something that you're doing or that you've talked a lot about, I've heard you, many ways bring this up, and in your book is talking about root causes. Your how your nutrition has impacted your ability to do like it's all connected. So I wanted to hear you in your words
Yeah.
how you came to that and how it all works together.
Yeah. So, honestly, now knowing everything that I know now, I really do think that, like, because, I grew up and I ate what most people eat, which is just like you eat dessert for breakfast,
Yeah.
some kind of like muffin or chocolate chip cake or something like that.
Yeah.
And then for lunchtime, you eat like I remember I'd go to school, I'd eat like chocolate milk, fried chicken tenders, French fries, all that
Sure.
stuff. And then I would come home, I'd just stop by like some convenience store, buy like chips or buy candy or something. And then maybe, depending on what my mom cooked, maybe I would eat a vegetable. maybe, but I'm not even sure. And maybe she didn't, I just didn't eat them. But honestly, knowing everything I know now, I honestly think that if I was eating a healthy diet and I was just taking care of like the vessel that I go through in life, my body and my mind, in terms of like how I moved, how I slept, just really how I treated my body and my brain, I really do think that I would not have hit rock bottom in 2015, 16, and I just would have incrementally and slowly grown, right?
Mhm.
Because I see that in a lot of people. A lot of people, if they sort of have like the right foundation set up in their lives early on, they can like just incrementally grow their entire lives. And for sure, I mean, everyone faces failures and mistakes and troubles, but a lot of the times you won't necessarily have to hit like a super severe rock bottom to like learn a message when you've sort of been in this pattern your entire life. And
Mhm.
so, the way that I look at nutrition is because, um, like in my book, I talk about this, but like in the mental health community and even in like the leadership community, there's a big talk on a neurotransmitter that's usually implicated in a lot of mental health conditions and also just like how to be a leader. And it's serotonin.
Mhm.
And serotonin is a neurotransmitter that does a lot of different things in our body, from regulating our mood to our appetite to sleep to our social group functioning. So it's extremely important when it comes to social anxiety. And I focus a lot about it in the book. And, from I think it was like maybe 15 years ago, all the current science was pointing that like serotonin, because it's a neurotransmitter, is in your brain. And it turns out, yeah, some of it is in your brain, but not that much. Like 5, 10, 15% of serotonin is in your brain. The rest of it, 90 to 95%, is in your gut microbiome,
Mhm.
which I never learned about in school as a system, but it is this thing next to, or it's an ecosystem of bacteria between your stomach and your intestines. And every time that you eat something, they process it first and they hand it off to your body. And so a major part of how serotonin is properly regulated and produced is through what your gut microbiome is doing. And so, for example, like to go back to what we were talking about, the root cause, it's been shown, or it's been known, that if you experience a very high amount of like chronic stress due to
Mhm.
some kind of traumatic event, that can disrupt your gut microbiome and it can put it in a unbalanced state of dysbiosis.
Mhm.
And dysbiosis of your gut has been linked to so many chronic health conditions and then also many mental health issues. And so for me, like in my journey, I kind of accidentally stumbled on this. I didn't even mean to kind of go into nutrition first, but I'm so glad I did, because I think it gave me a real foundational baseline that has enabled me to, like, again, like, for sure, I have my problems, I have my moments, I have my bad weeks, but like I haven't really experienced, any kind of like severe anxiety or depression then since 2015, 2016. And
Mhm.
I think a major part of that is because when you look at the science and our biochemistry and how our gut talks to our brain, it's so correlated. And I focus on that a lot. And so, like, when I was first starting my journey, I remember I stopped eating like processed foods, artificial foods, things that just came in bags, boxes. When
Mhm.
I would go to the grocery store and I would turn a box over on the other side and you look at the ingredient list and it's like an essay and there's like 1,000 ingredients and it's like red 6, yellow 5, dioxide, titanium, something, something. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, a lot of people don't know. It's like you should be able to recognize all those ingredients. If you don't, it's not because, you don't need a degree. You don't need to be a doctor to understand what you're putting inside your body. But it's as simple as like, if you don't recognize it when you're reading it, when you put it into your body won't recognize it either. And that can have a varying range of dysfunctions depending on the person to person. So like, for example, there are studies done in like the UK that show children who consume a lot of these artificial dyes, like I mentioned, like yellow 6, red 9, like you see them like anytime you're at a grocery store or convenience store and
Mhm.
it's like candy, anything that's brightly colored, they all have those dyes in there. It's been proven to cause ADHD in children, other learning and mental health issues. And so that's just like one case. There are so many scenarios where just a different food. And I think like, um, especially today in 2020, where not exactly everyone is just eating home cooked meals that like your mom makes when you get home. And it's just like this, like the normal, like some kind of like vegetable, some kind of like meat or protein. Most people aren't even eating that anymore.
Mhm.
People are mostly eating the American standard diet. They're going out. And so I think that has a major correlation to do with a lot of the mental health issues that we're seeing today, let alone the physical health issues like obesity and whatnot, which most people associate when it comes to food. But there's a much deeper picture here.
Mhm. That obesity is really another state of being malnourished, even though
Mm,
people think of it as having no weight, but having all that weight and having the disruption in the gut microbiome is huge. And I'm so
it's
fascinated that
huge.
you delved so deeply into it. And I know you interview a lot of people on Humans 2.0 on your podcast where you're in school every day basically because
Yeah.
you're gathering information from the experts, and I'm like, this is so brilliant. One of the questions I had for you while you were talking, I was thinking of, there's a school of people, particularly in where I'm a nurse, so I in my training at Simmons over at in
Nice.
Boston, and also I went to Tufts. First did biopsychology, then I did nursing. But we didn't learn about nutrition at all, or gut
Nah.
health, or the endocannabinoid system, or all this stuff
Mm,
is so new. So now medicine is really behind, and a lot of people will have a hard time getting their head around food, sleep, stress management having
mm.
as much of an impact as this pill I can give you. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking me. So, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing like that I've learned from my experience is like I remember, and I wasn't really diagnosed with any kind of like serious issue like cancer or anything like that, but I remember when I was like growing up and I was kind of facing all these physical health issues which can be linked to like autoimmune, a disrupted gut. I remember just going to the doctor's office like all the time, not day in and day out, but I remember I would just go and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, you have this problem. Here is this thing to take every day," and then
Mhm.
that's it. And you know, like, don't even worry about it. You can't really do anything about this. This is just the way that it is.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, for sure, I mean, I don't want to, there's no such thing as a blanket statement. And so, of course, there are health conditions where you need, professional healthcare assistance like taking medicine. But I definitely think that a major part of this is just because like we've just gotten so detached from 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 nature and from just how we've grown. And I think as we become detached from that, we begin to see a lot of health issues because there are these underlying imbalances that are telling our brains and body like, hey, you're doing something wrong.
Mhm.
And so when I began to eat healthy, I remember going to my doctors and I remember a ton of the medicine that I was taking. I remember like, going back and they did different kinds of tests and stuff. And they were like, yeah, all the health conditions you had before, they're gone. Keep doing what you're doing. You don't need to take these medicines anymore. And
Mhm.
so I'm very lucky. I kind of got out of that cycle as easily as I did compared to other people who face like different side effects from the different medicines and cause
Mhm.
them to do that and this and that. And so honestly, I just think that like every industry, it needs to adapt. And like, at this time when I was learning more about health, I mean, I fired two of my doctors. And then now the doctor that I go to, the
Mhm.
first question he asks me is, what am I eating? And like, how's my stress and different things like that. And so I think that is really the way. And honestly, like the best doctors that I know, the top doctors, they all know this stuff. And so I think it's just a matter of time. But then again, I think there is a mass, just like any large group of people, whether you're talking about doctors or nurses or pharmacists or CEOs or whoever, there's a lot of people. There's millions of those people. And so not everyone is going to be willing to learn if they really want to have the best priorities and care for the patient. And so I know a lot of doctors and a lot of people who use their degree and use their titles as ways to defend their ego. And they're like, oh, I don't need to learn this stuff because I learned this stuff from school and I've been doing it for 20 years. Well, it's like, yeah, what if you've been doing it wrong for 20 years? And what if you could help exponentially more people? And so I think it's going to change for sure. And it is changing. And I'm seeing that every single day as I'm talking to people like on the front line of this, because this actually works. Like there have been varying studies that take different medicines that compare them to placebo and show almost no increase. But something like tackling your food and like your stress levels, that actually works. You can see almost an immediate difference in that. And so I think hopefully in our society, we're going to just move towards things that actually work, that people can do and see an immediate thing in. Like, for example, like I don't really think like the success that I've had on my podcast or like on this book that just came out 24 hours ago and it's already in the top 99 on all of Amazon. I don't think that has to do with me. I just think it's because I've like explored so many ideas that I just talk about what works. I just talk about what can I tell someone that can give them like the biggest bang for their buck. And like, that's why I talk about biochemistry a lot in this, because it's like, it's really hard to get someone who has a lot of these fears to like go out there and start incrementally exposing themselves to, if they've got all these other stress issues in their physical body. And so for me, it's like just trying to set someone up on like the most easiest, simplest, practical runway to make them do whatever they want to do, including conquering their fears and being the person they want to be in just a much easier, better, more efficient way to do it, you know?
I love that word, runway. That's so exciting. And congrats on the book. I love it already. And I can't wait for the audio version because I'm an Audible girl, but
yeah. And Kevin's doing that with me. He
he
interviewed me
is?
between the chapters.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Nice. I have another question that has to do with one of your rock bottoms when things got pretty dark. And one of the reasons I started Rock Bottom Syndicate was my concern about suicide and being at such a dark place and not having a healthy body and brain, that somebody may make a decision that will lead to them committing suicide or something very bad that, you know, that is more on impulse. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like what will work? What can we do together? What can we do as a society to help people in that place?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2015, 2016, I definitely fell down my own version of rock bottom, which involved me gaining a lot of weight really quickly, being over 200 pounds, sort of like my lifelong social anxiety that I always had went to like social isolation. And I began to become like pretty depressed for the first time in my life, which led me to, you know, becoming suicidal for like 2 to 3 weeks. And, you know, when you look at it, 850,000 people every year commit suicide.
Mhm.
And that's a crazy number. You know, like you're more likely to die by killing yourself than for someone else to kill you today in 2020 in the world, which is crazy. And also good, I guess, in some other ways too. But I think the biggest piece to realize is one, first off, like I think the first half of the coin is like we talked about, like biochemistry. Like I talk about this study in my book that shows a lack of sleep being extremely correlated to suicide. When you look, like as someone personally for me who studied social anxiety, when you look at the data, social anxiety is heavily connected to substance abuse and also social isolation, both of which are extremely correlated to suicide. And so I think first and foremost, you need to address it at a biochemical level, because it's been shown that, like, for me, like in the section in my book where I kind of talk about this, it's called First My Gut Broke and Then My Brain Broke. And I talk about the time where
Yes.
the only time where I've been suicidal in my life was when I gained a tremendous amount of weight because I was eating all this crap. And so I think that's a major part of it. And then I think the second part is you're not actually living your own life. I think if you're suicidal, and like biochemical reasons aside, you're not actually living your own life. And so for me, looking back at it now, what I realized was, like, when I was getting those emotions and feelings of being suicidal, I realized what I was actually trying to do, what my brain was actually trying to get me to do, was it was trying to get me to kill the sort of old version of myself that I had sort of just put together in the last 10 years of my default setting in life. And I wanted to break through and live a different version, live a different person. And a big reason to kind of go back here, like, people with social anxiety, it doesn't just have to do with how they behave in front of other people. It doesn't just have to do that. Social anxiety can also be defined as an excessive need to manage your self-image. And so that can have a wide-ranging effects on someone's self-esteem, how they think about themselves. And so a major part of social anxiety is, like, you don't become yourself. You are essentially living in this disassociated version of reality, because every time you get the opportunity to be your authentic self, your brain activates an emergency response and it gets you to do fear-based actions. And then every day at night you walk away and you're like, man, I have so many regrets. I should have said this to that person. I should have actually been myself. And so when I was suicidal, I kind of realized that I wasn't actually living my own life. And I realized that in order for me to do new things, I have to stop what I'm doing now. You have to almost get rid of the old. You have to get rid of what you've been doing in order to do what you actually want to do. And so I kind of realized this, of course, after, and like something I haven't even said, but like a friend of mine, Garen Jones, he says, when you're at rock bottom, you don't know you're at rock bottom. There's that other quote that says, when you're in the picture, you can't see the frame. And so, like, what I always tell people too is, like, when I was at my version of rock bottom, it's like the smallest, like, little, like, your mind opens up because you see some glimmer of hope. Your mind opens up because you start to get, like, microscopically curious about, like, one thing, and then you just take that step. But, like, at no point is there, like, some, like, thunderbolt gonna come to you from the sky that's gonna, like, hit you and be like, yo, here are all the answers. This is the plan that you have to do. It's like, it's just not the way it works. And like you said, I didn't even know I was at my rock bottom until, like, months or maybe even a year after, where I realized, like, what was actually going on. And I remember the first thing that I began to realize was actually, like, going back to what I said about nutrition. The first thing that I realized was that I was overweight. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and being like, why aren't my jeans fitting anymore? And I remember, like, kind of being in the present moment of my life for, like, one of the first few times, because when I realized that I was suicidal and I, like, was trying to do something that I normally wouldn't do, that kind of made me understand the severity of the situation I was in. And it almost kind of made me like snap out of it, because what I realized was, like, 6 months leading up to that, I was almost like in a trance. Like, I had no idea what was going on. And it was really just me trying to not choose the right path. It was really me just trying to, like, kind of see the path that life would potentially offer me. And it said, like, hey, Mark, you have some amount of potential inside of you. And also, when I was 18, I realized that I had social anxiety. And so I sort of saw a target that I could hit, because up to that moment, I had no idea what was going on. I just thought there was something wrong with me. Like, I thought I was some sort of a moral failure. And so when I kind of saw that target, then it kind of began to give me an option of, like, wait, you can actually do something about this. But if you haven't been doing that for your entire life and you've been operating in, like a fear scarcity based way
Mhm.
of just trying to do the easiest thing possible, not trying to do the hard things that are actually going to get you the furthest in life, then that can be extremely difficult. And so I just tried to escape. I tried to escape with food. I tried to escape with sleeping, Netflix, alcohol, drugs, partying, all that stuff. And that's like what put me in this trance. And then I woke up out of it like 3, 6 months later, and I was like, whoa, why am I overweight? And then
Yeah.
I began to like tackle food, which then led me to like understanding more of nutrition. And then as I began to eat healthy and I began to not eat crappy food, I kind of felt my brain turn on for the first time in my life, which
Mm.
enabled me to have more energy, which then enabled me to do like read books, meditate, which gave me a higher awareness of all these things that I'm kind of sharing with you right now. And so it was just step by step by step, not realizing the big picture, but just taking a step because that's what you've got to do. Because when you're at rock bottom and you can kind of, not even if you don't know you're at rock bottom, but you're feeling these really terrible emotions,
Mhm.
like there's no pushing that because like you're gonna break almost in a way. And
Yeah.
I think honestly what stops a lot of people from kind of having the breakthrough or at least desire to take a step is I think a lot of people are just trying to um, use things as medicine. They're trying to like escape. They're trying to use things to help cope with their pain. And there are healthy ways to cope with your pain in life, like doing yoga, going for a walk, having a conversation with a good person. And there are unhealthy ways to cope, like doing drugs, abusing food. It can really be anything that anyone can abuse.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people are not letting themselves get to a point where they can reach that pain because they're trying to numb it out with artificial forms of pleasure, whether it's food, whether it's sex, whether it's drugs. And so I think that's a major part of it. And like in my book, like in the first chapter, there's like exercises for stuff to do and whatnot.
Mhm.
And one of the things is I tell people like, try to identify your vices, try to identify what you're using to cope with pain in
Mhm.
maybe a not so great way, and try like pausing them for 24 hours and seeing what happens. Like I get a lot of people that tell me like on a separate note, like, Mark, I'm not motivated. I don't know how to do this. Well, it's because you're not feeling the pain of your life because you're trying to drown it out with all this artificial forms of pleasure. And again, it doesn't have to be drugs. It can be anything that anyone can
Mhm.
abuse. And it's like, it doesn't have to do with the tool. It has to do with the user behind the tool for the most part. I mean, don't do crack or heroin, but, um, that's a major part. And so I think a lot of people, quite frankly, like it sounds like a paradox, but I think a lot of people don't get the breakthrough because they don't let themselves sink to that low that's not being like artificially stood up with a fake foundation of fake happiness that is running off of external things like people mind numbing themselves with pleasure, if that makes any sense.
It makes a ton of sense. I learned from Mike Moosberger. I don't know if you've met him. He uses an expression, embrace the pain. And so what you're saying is reminding me of that. It's scary. It sounds very scary to me because that's why we're numbing it, because what we don't know. But you're suggesting the same thing, to really become aware.
I mean, honestly, yeah. I mean, honestly, when you just said that, I was looking at like my mind reflected in like all the other problems in my life where I'm still messing up and whatnot. And it's just like, again, like I don't want to give the illusion that I'm perfect because I mess up every single day, like all the time. But it's like when I'm in this world so much that I just know, like I've seen patterns and things come up and again,
Yeah.
like waves hitting the shoreline of an ocean. It's wave after the other, the other, the other.
Yeah.
And so I think when you realize that, you're like, well, what other choice is there? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you could still do that. But it's like, if you really understand the big picture, it's like, I'm either going to feel pain now and just like, I could just rip off the Band-Aid, or this is going to be something that's going to be devastating. Like for me, like going through 10 years of being socially anxious is insane, was crazy. And I don't even like,
Mm.
to me, when I like my mentality now, it's like kind of hard to think about. It's like so foreign to me now because
Yeah.
that's just not who I am. But for me, it's like I would just much rather get on the front edge of that than do it. And then also I think it's like this, like I had to go through 10 years of this for me to finally work on myself for like the last 5 years or so, and then write a book about it that got me to this point. And so, I'm a believer of like everyone is exactly where they're supposed to be. And sometimes you do have to get hit in the face by that lesson for 5 years in a row, for 10 years in a row, for you to finally wake up a decade later and be like, whoa. Or you could like actually take advantage of the insane, exponential growth that the world is in right now. And you could listen to podcasts, read books. And even if like you don't even want to listen to content from the outside, you could just like going back to the beginning of like, you could be a student of your life. You could try to be a learner and try to learn everything. And so I think when you can approach it from that angle, you're always asking yourself like, instead of how can I run away from the situation or how can I numb myself, you then begin to ask yourself like, how can I learn my way out of the situation? Because there's people that have gone through this. There's people that have gone out of this and they've rebounded 10,000 times. And so it just begins sort of like it's a pattern,
Well, that's exactly why I wanted you on Rock Bottom, because you're sending that message that people can learn their way out. I'm really curious, and maybe I'm not sure if you've said it yet, but when you were at your rock bottom, at that time when you were suicidal, did anything, you said you snapped your fingers and you were like, I snapped out of it. Do you remember anything that happened that just gave you that little bit of hope?
Yeah, it was two things. So one was like earlier when I started to do this. And here's the thing, like when you don't, like for me, like looking back at it, I made a deliberate decision to walk around the not so great areas of Boston at 2 or 3 a.m. because I wanted somebody to kill me. But again, when you're in it, you don't really know that you're doing that. And so because you're unconscious of the dialogue in your brain that's actually running your life.
Yeah.
And so I remember like what I began to do was I actually began to listen to like my first podcast. And I remember like literally the first podcast episode I ever listened to was by Tim Ferriss. And it was this episode where he was talking about his own life. And he was talking about the time where he was in college and he was also suicidal. And now Tim Ferriss is like changing industries. He's like a top author. He's doing a lot of great things. Yeah. And I was listening to that podcast and I was like, wait, like I'm literally trying to do what this guy is talking about right now while I'm walking. And so I kind of got like a model, almost like a potential path of like, wow, like I'm literally in the same exact position this guy is talking about now. And now he's like super successful in a meaningful way. And so I didn't, again, like after that, it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm going to like, I just listened to it. And so I think like in the background that began to like slowly open up my mind. And then I think the second thing that gave me hope was, I remember like a couple weeks after that, I was walking and I remember there was like, I wasn't on my phone. I wasn't listening to any podcasts or anything. There were no cars in the street. There was nobody walking. And I remember just like hearing like this eerie sense of silence for like the first time. And looking back at that, I think it was just like the first time where I wasn't distracted by something and there was no stimulus. There was no nothing. And, I don't really know what it was, but I kind of felt like I kind of got a glimpse of my intuition. I kind of got a glimpse of like what happens when there's no noise, there's nothing your brain needs to pay attention to. And again, it's not like I heard like a sentence or I heard like my intuition tell me something, but I just kind of felt like this warm feeling from like my intuition. Like I felt something from the inside. Yeah. And it was like one of the few times where I had kind of felt like I had ever felt that, because for most of my life, I thought I was disassociated, desensitized because of all that I had gone through. And so I didn't really feel and like, again, it goes back to what we said at the beginning of like, when you put on a mask or a suit of armor as a protective mechanism, it gets you to not feel the highs of life and the low lows of life because you have that armor on. Right. And so, yeah, you are protecting yourself emotionally to a degree that's even debatable because it might bite you back later.
Right.
But you're also protecting yourself against the highest of highs. And so for a while, I thought that I was desensitized, deassociated. And so when I felt that like warm feeling from the inside, that I kind of felt like that was like one of the first few times in my life where I kind of felt like a genuine sense of emotion. And I don't know what, maybe it was because of hope, maybe it's because of desperation. I don't know. And so I remember when I kind of felt that, I definitely got a little bit emotional. And I remember kind of running home. And then that's where I stood in front of myself in the mirror. And I kind of had that like break in my conscious dialogue, a conscious interrupt that kind of made me like get in the present moment and be like, wait, why are my pants like not fitting, and kind of realize. So great question.
I am really glad I asked you that because
Yeah.
you answered it beautifully. And I'm feeling very emotional right now just hearing that. What you do now, I'm so glad you took your armor off, because what you do now is what Tim Ferriss did for you. You're modeling.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're doing that thing where you're literally saving lives.
10 years later, it's super interesting because like a lot of people like now doing that I do literally every single day I wake up, whether it's a message or a voice message or a voicemail or a video that someone emails me, and people tell me this. And when people like, when I go to events, or like sometimes if I've had people even just meet me randomly, like in Boston or like on the train or something, and kind of tell me these things. And I always think like, there are so many people out there who, like, for example, Tim Ferriss has no idea who I am. He has no idea I exist, but yet he's had, an impact on my life. And I know there's other people out there where I've also done the same thing. And so I hope like 10 years from now, when I'm like 30, I look back at this and I'm like, man, because I think a big part of success is like, because like personally for me and from my perspective, like I think I've made it, materially. I've definitely got a long ways to go, but both like materially and just like I'm genuinely fulfilled and I'm happy and I have the right people around me in my life. I think I've made it. Like, I think this is like not by no means the peak, but I think this is definitely like amazing. But after you reach that, it doesn't really like, there's no meaning in just that, even though you're doing like healthy, great things. The other part of life, like the second side of the coin, that's also as important, is being of service to other people. So it's like, now that I've climbed out of that hellhole, you just got to throw the rope down. You got to throw the ladder down and try to get other people out, because that's the point of life, in my opinion. One is all about self-growth and self-evolution. Then number two is you being of service to other people. And I think as long as you're doing both of those things genuinely, and you're not just building an ego around doing those things because like people recognize you because you whether it's you host a podcast or you're an author and like you talk about all these things, but do you actually do them? Then I think like you can't go wrong in life. So I think as long as you're doing those two things genuinely, and again, you're not like doing the same trick that your brain is always trying to play, then I think you can't go wrong in life. But then again, I could be wrong in life. So maybe we'll have to save it for another podcast. Maybe next time you have me back on, I'll be like, it's actually 1, 2, 3, I don't know.
Well, I think that in some ways I think of it as a parent and grandparent now, that I just have to go on faith that this is of benefit, that I may not see the result of my actions today with my children, my grandchildren, or the generations to come. So I love that you recognize you're going to be of service, even if that person doesn't, the two of you don't connect in real time. You're connecting in the universe some way.
Somehow, some way. And like the matter of the fact is like Tim Ferriss is one person. I don't even know how many people have done that for me that I just don't know of yet. Like, I think my 9th grade history teacher definitely did something like that for me. Just like different people, my sister, my mom, my dad, like just so many, my best friend, like so many people that I may not even thank like every day, but yet like, who knows how life could have happened if they didn't do what they did. Maybe because of someone else did that before them and someone else did that before them, or maybe it's just like the goodness of human nature. So I think it's all of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to make sure our listeners know about your book, where to get it, and how to reach out to you.
Yes, so you can get Screw Being Shy on Amazon, but if you want a good central link to where you can check out everything I've got going on, just go to my website, which is my first and last name.com, markmetry.com. Joyce, thank you so much for having me on Rock Bottom Syndicate. This was fantastic. You are a
Thank
great host.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I want you to know you have made a tremendous difference in my life and all the people I will touch. And I really appreciate you for that. I'm so emotional because this is such a great show. So thank you, Mark. I really appreciate your time.
You're the best. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. You too.
You're awesome.
Hey everyone, Joyce Strong back again just to say thank you for tuning into the podcast. I want to remind you that you can visit me at totalwellcoach.com, which links to all of my social media and my offerings, my Inner Circle membership, which is an entry-level way to get involved, get coaching, and get all my classes for one low monthly fee. And if you want more, work with me one-on-one with intensive nutrition and lifestyle so that you can opt out of chronic disease, then get in touch with me and we'll talk about how that happens. We spend a lot of time together. I want you to join the one-on-one coaching if you're really committed to making a lifestyle change and you want a guide and a support and a friend to walk with you in this journey. You're going to do the work. I'm going to support you. You already have what you need inside you to make these changes. So do reach out to me at totalwellcoach.com. I love it when you subscribe and share and comment on all my YouTube and on Apple Podcasts and all those places because it elevates my frequency and it gets more people to hear and see what I do. So please, 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 it means the world to me if you would help support me that way because you're helping support my entire network. I'm here for you if you need me. So thanks again for tuning into the podcast and reach out. Love to hear you. Love to get your comments. Love to get your DMs. Love to get your emails. Any way I can help, let me know. That's what I'm here to do. I love to serve.